Hi and welcome to lesson 6. So, do you remember we looked at the spreadsheet initially and we talked about these things called cells, and I talked about the active cell. And then in the last video I started clicking around and seemed to do some really weird things. So let me go through some of these things. I have here, as I say, the cells, and I have the active cell. But I can, simply by clicking, holding the mouse button down and dragging the mouse down, I have the ability to select more than one cell. Now you'll notice that they are greyed out, that these are selected, and you can tell that because of the green box. So are these now all active cells? Well, no. The active cell is the one at the top, and we can see that by the F5 up here. That's the active cell, but I have selected these cells, and that allows me to do a few things with these. I can change the way they look, which is what we're going to be looking in the next video. So selecting cells can be really useful. I can select cells, and then what I can do is I can press the Enter key on my keyboard and the active cell will change. And if we look in the name box, I can now see that F6 is the active cell. Now F7, and so on. And when I get down to the bottom, it goes back to the top. So I can change the active cell, which means that as soon as I'm there, I can actually type and press enter, and the details will appear there. Now don't be tempted to use the arrow keys, because that will deselect the cells you've got. That's alright. I press the delete key to get rid of the content. So look for the delete key, which is normally to the right of your enter key, and you just delete the content. So I can select a range of cells. Notice I emphasize the word arrange. That's not me just being weird, that's the term for it. So I've selected a range of cells. So this is called a range. I don't have to just go downwards. Obviously I can go upwards as well, and I can go to the right, or I could go to the left. Equally, I could also go diagonally, and I can go a selection of cells in that sense. So I can select more. Remember, it's click, hold the mouse button down, drag down, and then across, and keep moving the mouse, and until you let go of the mouse you can choose how wide you want that to be. When I press the enter key, I will go through changing the active cell, but it will only be active within the selected range. Remember, don't use the arrow keys or you'll lose what you've selected. It's not gone, it's just that I've now got to go and reselect them if I want to. What else can I do? Well, I can also select by column by simply clicking on the column's cell reference. If I click there, I've now selected everything in column G, and I mean everything. I told you originally there are 1 million, over 1 million cells going down. I have now selected all 1 million plus cells, and if I wanted to do the I can do so. And if I want to click, hold the mouse button down and drag it across, I can select multiple columns. Obviously I can do the same with the cell references for the rows. Click on them, and I've click on them, and I will select the entire row, everything in that row. That's that 2.5 million cells are now all selected, ready for me to do something with them. Again, I can select a range of rows. Now I could select all rows, but that means going down all the way down by 1 million. That's a bit tiring. To do the other way, I could do it that way, but there's 2.5 million that way, so that's not very good. So what I could do is, instead of clicking on the columns to select the columns or the rows to select the rows, I could also go between them to what doesn't look like it's a button at all, but click on that, and I've now selected the entire sheet, all 2.5 by 1 million of them. That's a huge number of cells. So I've now selected them all. Something worth noting about selection. Let's look back at this name box. It keeps telling me what is the active cell. F5, C3, I9. But let's now click, hold the mouse button down and drag down. Can you see as I drag down, I've selected 4 cells and it's saying 4RX1C. The X is just represents times, the R is row, the C is column. I have 4 rows by 1 column selected. And if I keep moving that, I can see now I've got 6 rows and 4 columns. Remember, I haven't let go of the mouse button, so that's perfectly fine. As long as I keep doing that, I can keep moving that and those numbers will change. It's not until I've stopped 8 rows by 5 columns and let go of the mouse will it return to telling me which one's the active cell. So that's really useful. I now know how many cells I've selected. Why is that useful? Well, when we come to the revision lesson, we'll see how that becomes useful to us. So I can select a range of cells. Another way of doing quick cells is to click on the cell and then rather than hold the mouse button down and run it across, is to click on the column, hold down the shift button. Now that's usually above the what's called control button, the CTRL. It's got an empty arrow pointing upwards and usually has the word shift. You've actually got 2 of them, one on the left hand side of your keyboard and one on the right hand side. The right hand side one being just below the enter key. But if I hold down the shift key, I then can move my mouse all the way over to, let's say, the R, click, and it will select all that range just in a simple click. B, Shift, R, selected. 2, Shift, 29, selected. And then we've got that weird one. Well, do you remember I said that the Shift key is just above the Control key, the CTRL key? Well, let's hold down the CTRL key. If I hold that one down, if I click on B first, then hold down the CTRL key and then click on D, I've selected columns B and D but not C. This differs from the Shift because Shift will select everything from B to D. This will only select the columns I'm clicking on. Not only that, but I can click on rows as well. At the very least, this lets me build a very pretty pattern out of the crossovers all the time until I click away. So the Shift key will allow me to select multiple cells from B to, let's say, Z. If I've chosen an active cell and then hold down Shift and click on B, it will select everything across there. I can hold Shift and do entire rows. Or I can hold down the CTRL key and select just the cells I'm interested in. And obviously if I click on the cell, hold down Shift and then click down here, it will do the same thing then. So holding down Shift, click first of all on the cell you want, hold down the Shift key, click somewhere else, and now I've got my selection. 17R, 17 rows by 9 columns is this selection. I'm still holding the Shift key down. As soon as I let go of it, it tells me the active cell is E5. Similarly, I could click there. I've clicked on D5. I'm now going to hold down the Control key and I'm going to click on G9, and you can see that I can select just the cells I'm clicking on, and it's just very pretty. That does become useful. So knowing what the Shift key does and what the Control key does is really useful. Do notice, by the way, when I'm doing the Control key one, the active cell is the last one I clicked on. So the active cell changes with that option. What happens when I press enter? It jumps in order between the selection. Hopefully you remembered the order. So in this video we've learned how to select cells just by clicking, just by dragging, just by dragging to the side, just by dragging downwards, clicking on the columns, clicking on the rows, clicking on the columns and dragging, clicking on the rows and dragging. Remember, when I say dragging, I mean hold down the mouse, the left hand mouse button, and drag downwards. Using the shift key to do a range of cells between the 2 points clicked. Can be that column, row, or just a selection of cells. Or hold down the control key and simply select only the rows and columns you choose, or just the cells you choose. That's selection. In the next one, we're going to be looking at altering the columns and rows. That might sound a little bit mysterious. It will make complete sense at the end of the next video. So see you there.